All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Smith. I'm the president here at Eastern Michigan University. I want to welcome you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for trying to figure out what the dots mean on the chairs. The yellowish gold dots indicate that if you are not with a family member or other close associate, you are to put a chair between you. I learned that all of 7 minutes ago. And I had to look 3 times for the dots. So thank you again for being here. We have an esteemed colleague and leader in the person of Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. We are very thankful for her taking time to do some dialogue with students before, and we're very excited to hear what she has to say this evening. I don't know how many people know all the details about the Center for Jewish Studies, and I certainly don't know them all. Professor Schickman does, because he's been here since its beginning. But 10 years ago, we started the Center for Jewish Studies with a christening, if you will, by Carl Levin, the great longest serving US Senator. I don't know if champagne bottles were involved or not, Marty, if we were, there was champagne, all right. I don't know if we were hitting fronts of ships or whatever it might have been, but 10 years ago, we started this initiative. And if you've been with us during the COVID times, you know that we have carried on with really spectacular lectures. And I don't do this often enough, but I try to thank Dr. Schickman and his team for really tremendous work that they've done as part of our community in sharing some really great things that are truly global. We have had speakers and presenters coming to us from around the world, and that is one of the advantages of Zoom, where we might not be able to have that speaker from the Middle East, but when you do Zoom and they're willing to stay up at ungodly hours, we can make that happen. So this evening, I just have a couple of housekeeping things, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Schickman, and we will begin. First of all, we will ask that you keep on your mask if you are not speaking. If we have a speaking role for you, we obviously, as I just did, we can take off our mask and speak, but then we'll put the mask back on. I thank you for your COVID passes. Some of you haven't experienced this before. We do this every day. Our faculty, our students, our staff do the little COVID pass and say, how are we feeling? Do you get a smiley face? If anybody got a frowny face, they're not here. I guess they're joining us on Zoom if they got a frowny face. But again, that's part of our mitigation strategy. And we are keeping, to the very best of our ability, 16,000 people, 16,000 students, and a number of other people in faculty and staff roles as safe as we can. The last thing I will say, and I think it's a true hallmark of Eastern Michigan University, we don't often agree. We don't always disagree, but we don't always agree, but we're always civil. So I thank you for thinking of that, thinking of how we do that in a university setting. We might ask probative questions. We might ask difficult questions. I was in a board meeting today where someone said that one of our topics made them a little uncomfortable. And I said, that's why universities exist. So we ask for your civility. We ask for your obvious respect for not only our speaker, but for our friends in the audience. And again, I thank you for being here. And Dr. Schickman, I've taken up way too much time. Thank you very much. Congresswoman, we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Smith. Some logistical matters before we begin. If you are watching on Zoom and have questions, and there are, we think, close to 150 Zoomers out there, please include them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. For those of you in the auditorium, we passed out some note cards when you came in. Please write down your questions and we will try to respond to as many as we can in our allotted time. We'll be collecting them toward the end. Students who are here for class credit of some kind, please make sure your name is added to the list at the auditorium exit at the conclusion of tonight's conversation. And finally, and this is really important, finally, upon exiting at the conclusion of this evening's discussion, we will be distributing free parking passes. If you parked at the student center lot, please make sure to get one. So, good evening. And welcome to the EMU Center for Jewish Studies conversation with Representative Elissa Slotkin. It takes, I should say, something of a village to put together an event like this, especially in this time of COVID. So I beg your indulgence as I offer some thank yous, and please bear with me. The EMU Center for Jewish Studies has received constant and consistent support from President Jim Smith and Dr. Connie Smith. And we are so grateful. They are really, really, really wonderful to us. In the President's office, I want to thank William Pollard and Lee Graydon for all their help with this program. Provost Rhonda Longworth has been among our greatest advocates, and I cannot begin to express my appreciation for her guidance and advice. I can't say enough about the kindness and dedication of Meg Castro and the wonderful EMU Student Center staff, our AV geniuses, Steve Martin and Eric Kirkland, and the courage of the EMU police force protecting us all here this evening. I want to thank Cindy Huey and EMU Hillel, Eastern's College Democrats, the Harold Grinspoon Life and Legacy Initiative, and my brilliant undergraduate assistant, Cole Nelson, who's up there in the booth running the Zoom. Finally, none of this would be possible without Alexis Stannard and Congresswoman Slotkin's really remarkable staff, and they are fantastic to work with. In November 2018, Elissa Slotkin, a Jewish Democrat, defeated Republican Mike Bishop to represent Michigan's 8th, one of the more conservative districts in our state, and that is one amazing and truly impressive accomplishment. In Congress, she has proven herself over and over again able to work across party lines to advance important legislation. In the public sphere, she is a popular go-to figure, wicked smart, extraordinarily well-informed, funny, accessible, and charismatic.
I haven't even said anything yet.
Well, trust me. I have been wanting to bring her to EMU for years, and we are really fortunate to have her here tonight. So, Congresswoman Slotkin, I'd like to welcome you here to EMU.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You know, you've built a remarkable career in public service. You grew up Jewish on a farm in Holly, Michigan. You worked as a CIA analyst doing 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military, and now you're serving Michigan's 8th in the U.S. House. I was wondering, would you tell us a bit about yourself, your family, your education, your interests? I want to know what makes you want to be the public servant.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Thank you for being persistent in organizing this. Thank you to President Smith and for everyone who's here and on Zoom. You know, I think for me, you know, I grew up in suburban Detroit, between Holly and suburban Detroit when my parents got divorced, and my family, it was all in the meat business, so very different than national security. We were hot dog people, and we helped, we invented the ballpark Frank at Tiger Stadium. So
really
if you're like a real hot dog person, then and so national security, national service was never in the cards for me growing up. It just wasn't something that I was thinking about. But I happened to be on my second day of graduate school at Columbia University in New York City. I had just moved back actually from working in Egypt, and I moved to the city and I started school. I was in like a remedial economics class, and I walked outside and someone said, "It's so weird, a little plane just hit the World Trade Center." And that was my second day of school. And it just, you know, it's just one of those moments where your life kind of, there are different paths that you take because of events. And when the dust settled and the F-16s left the airspace, and the students had, you know, we had organized and we thought there was going to be a lot of wounded. So there were blood drives and just all kinds of things. I knew that I was going to do national security as a career. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that I was deeply affected by that day and wanted to get into that work. And, you know, a year later, I was recruited by the CIA right out of Columbia. And then a year after that, I was, you know, being sent off basically to my first of 3 tours in Iraq. And I think, you know, something that was very formative for me is going and doing a tour coming back for a year in Washington, going back and doing another year back and forth. I worked for whoever was my commander in chief. And that was both Democrats and Republicans, right? I worked for Bush, I worked for Obama. I think, you know, for some of us, sure, we would like to make money, but what gets us up in the morning is the mission. And I was at CIA for 8 years and the Pentagon for 7 years as an assistant secretary. And I think for me, there was nothing better than getting up every day and knowing why I was going to work and why it was important. Never thought about politics. I actually was, you know, I met my husband in Iraq. He's a career Army colonel. So when you're a CIA officer married to an Army colonel, you like back away slowly from politics. You don't get involved. I think the 2016 campaign, again, was just a really important inflection point for me. The tone and tenor of that campaign just felt different. In 2017, for the first time, I started thinking about running and started to pay more attention to who was running in this seat, you know, where my farm was and kind of what was happening in Michigan politics. I was hesitant about getting in until the spring of 2017, which is when that was the spring we were all talking about healthcare, right? We were all talking about repeal of healthcare. And President Trump had been pushing very hard to repeal Obamacare or the ACA. And that was very personal to me because my mother, like a lot of Jewish women, she died of ovarian cancer 10 years ago. And when she was diagnosed, my parents were divorced. When she was diagnosed, she did not have health care. She had let it lapse. She had a pre-existing condition. She had breast cancer 30 years before. So she always had a pre-existing condition. So when she lost her job and went looking for insurance, it was outside of her means to pay for insurance. And that experience of getting that terminal diagnosis, which I'm sure many people have had loved ones and have had that experience, your life, as you know it, just explodes. Everything else falls away. There is nothing important other than helping your parent, your loved one, do what they need to do to extend their life by a few months. And that same week and that same month that we were dealing with that terminal diagnosis were the same week and the same month that we were filling out the paperwork for her to declare bankruptcy. And so when I saw the House of Representatives repeal the ACA, which they did, the only reason we still have healthcare, the reason why people with pre-existing conditions cannot legally be gouged is because one man named John McCain walked across the floor of the Senate and voted against his party. One person who's no longer with us. So I watched that scene of people cheering and celebrating after they repealed the ACA. It was in the Rose Garden, the White House, and it just broke me. And so I decided to get in the race then. And it's different work, but it is mission driven work. I know what I'm supposed to be doing in the morning when I wake up.
Wow. So I'm going to go just a slight bit off script, if you don't mind. So preparing for your visit here today, I mean, we have a number of police officers. I mean, you know, every time Jewish Studies does an event, we have a police officer in the room because we've had some weirdness.
Yeah.
But we have more today, because your security means a great deal, but it also means that we have to worry about a congressperson in ways that we've never really had to worry about a congressperson. I mean, something's gotten out of the bottle in America, and it's terrifying. And you know, you work the halls of Congress. Do you think we can get that back in the bottle?
Well, I think yes, but I think it takes work, and it takes work and time, frankly. And I do think that we've normalized a level of anger and a level of hate where even in a school board meeting, people are talking to each other like they've never spoken to each other. You know, there's a public hearing about a gravel pit in one of my communities, and it breaks out into people saying, neighbors saying horrible things to each other. That level of anger is new, and it's become normalized. It's become okay to yell at someone at a Walmart or in a hospital ER. And I think that the only way that that changes if good people refuse to accept that and refuse. I mean, I really think of it as a leadership issue. If you're in a meeting and someone is being nasty and horrible to someone else because they happen to have a different opinion, it is our responsibility to say, you can't talk like that. You can't spit, we can debate ideas, but you can't spit anger at someone in a threatening way. And I think it's the same thing for people who threaten violence, especially online, right?
Yes.
It is no one's First Amendment right to threaten the security of anybody else. That is not a First Amendment right. And I think what we need to do is make very clear that if you're going to threaten someone's security, there's going to be consequences for that. And, you know, we were thrilled that we were able to get our first conviction of someone who's been threatening myself and Senator Stabenow for over a year. But it only changes if good people say something. It does not change if we sort of from a distance say that's really bad, that they shouldn't be doing that. We have to actually make clear through our actions and our deeds that it's not okay.
So, and this question, I guess, follows that in a more specific way. As a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security, where you chair the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence, and also on the House Committee on Armed Services, you've no doubt considered the resurgence of racism and anti-Semitism in the 21st century, both here and abroad. I mean, and I mean, we have seen a resurgence of kinds of gestures of racism and Ypsilanti this year that we've not seen in a while.
Yeah.
And how concerned should we be? And you know, is Washington doing anything to address this? And what more can we do?
Yeah, we should definitely be concerned. Last year, 2020 had the highest rate of hate crimes in 12 years, primarily directed at African Americans and Asian Americans. We've had a precipitous rise in anti-Semitism, and in Michigan, a 4-fold increase in anti-Semitic incidents over the past 3 years. So the data matters, facts matter, and we've seen an increase. That's unambiguous. I think the most important thing I would just say to dealing with this is reporting it. I can't tell you how underreported incidents of hate and anti-Semitism go, because people feel like, I don't want to bother people on something that's small. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to call the FBI or the Michigan State Police because someone spray painted, you know, the sidewalk outside my business. No, every single thing has to be reported. Otherwise, the authorities cannot see patterns that we can't see ourselves. And this was made very plain to me in Livingston County, not far from here. We had a problem with Zoom bombing, where a group of people would come on all at the same time, all show a picture on their cover picture of someone giving the Nazi salute. And they would all start texting, you know, the leader of the Zoom saying, we're going to rape and kill you. In this case, it was a Unitarian church doing Sunday services.
Oh my.
So I called the pastor and I said, I'm so sorry that that happened. No one deserves that. Please, pastor, you have to report that. And she said, I don't know. And no, you have to report. And then what happened? They did the same thing to the city of Brighton, right? You could start to see this pattern. If you don't report to both the FBI and the Michigan State Police, they cannot see the patterns. And these people who are doing this are on a very specific ladder of escalation. It's something that comes from my life as a CIA officer and looking at how Al-Qaeda and others get radicalized. They climb a ladder and they start often by being radicalized online, by just searching and surfing content that connects to a grievance that they have. It connects them and their pain to something greater, rightly or wrongly. And you start to see someone, I mean, it's just like, it's so standard. You start to see people start to spew that hate online, but just online. Then you start to hear of this person having problems with people, interpersonal problems at school or at work. They get into it with a coworker, they get into it with a professor, and they spew a racial epithet or an anti-Semitic comment. And then it goes from verbal to deeds. You see people spray painting and defacing property. You see them scrawling racist, hateful things on walls, on whatever. That person's on a ladder and they are climbing towards violence. And that is why it's important to get to folks, especially if it's young people, before they climb way too far.
In your capacity on these committees,
Yeah.
how is the United States thinking about, well, the racism and anti-Semitism of authoritarian governments abroad?
Well, look, there's something clearly going on. The rise of authoritarianism is going on across the world. It's not isolated to any one country. And I think most people in the US government believe it's a bit of a reaction to globalization, to a world that has become too fast and too complicated, where people feel like their old life is gone and they don't know what this new life is. There is a grievance there around that globalized world, particularly for people who feel like they're left out of that movement, of that progress towards a globalized world. And I think that combined with what we know is, the Xi Jinping in China and certainly Putin in Russia, they will say openly that they don't think democracy is a system that's fast enough and efficient enough to deal with the globalized world. Xi Jinping will say it. Because we're methodical, we have a process, we have laws, we have rules. Xi Jinping on his military, he can just tell them what to do, tell them what arms to buy, invest in this and that. We can't do the things that he can do. And so these authoritarian regimes think that they have us, that this is their next century. And I think that one of the byproducts of this kind of conversation is a lot of angry people who are supportive of and promoting authoritarianism. And we've seen movements like this. There's probably history students in the audience, right? This is not our first rodeo. This has happened to our world before, multiple times. And it is only the reaction from the public that counteracts the rise of authoritarian leaders. It's only, what we saw today, for anyone who watched the news in the Czech Republic, we saw a country moving towards authoritarianism that rejected it. And I think that's the conversation that's going on. And that conversation, whether we know we're having it or not, is happening inside our own country right now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
With the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Middle East has again become a central feature of political discussion. I'm not sure it really went away, but it's on the nightly news a lot. Was nation building always and necessarily doomed to failure in Afghanistan? I asked that because I was talking with one of your aides before, and I said, there are times when I think maybe we really do need to be the cops of the world. Maybe we should just accept that. Should have we stayed?
Look, I think that in Michigan, we had veterans of the war in Afghanistan who were sending their sons off to fight in the same war they fought on.
Yeah.
I think that is a healthy indicator that we needed to bring that war to a conclusion. And I don't know many people who believe that if we had doubled down and stayed another decade or 2 decades, that we would have fundamentally changed the basic issue with Afghanistan, which is you can't teach another nation 200 years of being a country in even 2 decades. You can't force another military to have the will to fight, right? You can't train that into them. That has to be inherent. And I think what is while I can want to be out of Afghanistan, no one felt good watching how we came out of Afghanistan. And those pictures will be with us for the rest of our lives. Just like, frankly, some pictures, you know, in the Saigon embassy were with me as I was a national security person, and I wasn't born when those pictures were taken, right?
I was.
So, okay. So I think we have to separate, you know, do we think it was the right thing to come out generally from how we came out specifically, which was, no one's proud of that. The thing that concerns me is the same thing that concerned me on September 12th, 2001. Will that country be a place where terrorist groups can reorganize, take territory, and project attacks outside of Afghanistan? The very reason we went in, and that's the question I get asked the most is, am I safer than I was on September 10th, 2001? And will they be able to attack us? And it is our responsibility to prevent that. And that is harder when we don't have an embassy, when we don't have a footprint there. So wouldn't have been my preference the way we did it. Certainly we want an embassy in every country that we engage with. As an intelligence person, it is important to be local. But that doesn't mean staying in 20 more years was the answer. The problem with Afghanistan is we change strategy every 18 months to 2 years. So we didn't have 20 years of the same strategy. We had 21-year strategies. And that was, you cannot win under those circumstances of surging and then pulling back and then surging and pulling back. So, you know, I had a conversation last night with a bunch of Afghanistan veterans just to check in. And I would say the overwhelming feeling was frustration that there was no accountability for people at the most senior levels for something that obviously did not go well. And I think I'm supportive of a commission that looks at our engagement in Afghanistan and tries to learn from it, so we don't just make the same mistake.
I'm going to ask you about two very different regimes with whom our country has very vexed relationships. How would you imagine U.S. policy regarding Saudi Arabia and Iran? What should we do?
Yeah. So two very different countries, two very different relationships. So when I was the student's age, studying the Middle East, I'm a Middle East specialist by training. It was an article of faith that we had to kind of handle Saudi Arabia with kid gloves, because they had us over a barrel, an oil barrel, right? They had the lion's share of the world's petroleum. Again, wasn't my era, but the gas crush of the 70s, gas lines, and the trauma that put the United States through meant that we had handled Saudi Arabia with kid gloves for about 40 years. And then something amazing happened. And over that time, basically through technology, the United States became a net energy exporter. So we no longer were dependent just on the fossil fuels of Saudi Arabia. We were able to produce some of those fossil fuels and other energy on our own. So, but what I don't think has happened is that the relationship has truly rebalanced from an era where we were dependent on them. I think we still have those gloves on a bit, and Saudi Arabia has the responsibility, like every other country in the family of nations, to abide by international norms and standards, provide rights to their people, and take responsibility for their action. They're in a war in Yemen that they are prosecuting in a way that violates basic human rights. And they are unwilling to be held accountable for things like the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. We should expect the same from them that we do from any other country that we want to do business with and have relations with. So we're partners, but that relationship, I think, should continue to change and balance with the changing world dynamics. On Iran, very different situation. On Iran, I mean, the big question with Iran is how do we move forward on the nuclear agreement? And with Iran, I mean, listen, it would be better for everyone if we had positive relations and they stopped threatening their neighbors and us, and they opened up to the world, and they didn't maintain this sort of trump card of a potential nuclear weapons program. That would be the best thing for the world. We attempted to get at that problem through negotiation. We negotiated a nuclear agreement. It was not perfect. But as someone who was at the Pentagon at the time, you have to deal with the preeminent threat. And the preeminent threat out of Iran is their nuclear capability, their ability to transition from nuclear power to a nuclear weapon in a short time frame and hold the region and rest of the world, frankly, hostage if they had that nuclear weapon. They also threaten using their ballistic missile program, and they also have a significant terrorism program. And while I didn't agree with the way that President Trump got out of the deal, I have been very clear with the Biden administration that if we're going to go back into the deal and we're negotiating to see if that's possible, let's try and do additional work on that ballistic missile program and on their terrorism. As someone who has run and hauled ass to get away from Iranian rockets in Iraq, let's do something about their bad behavior in other categories, and let's get their commitment to negotiate additional stackable agreements in addition to the nuclear agreement.
But have you supported the initial deal?
I did support the initial deal because, again, in a world where when you're at the Pentagon, our job is to maintain the war plans should we ever need to go to war with countries like Iran. We have war plans all over the world. Mm-hmm. And the biggest threat to our security and to international security coming out of Iran is the nuclear threat. So this deal, I may not have loved it, but it dealt with the nuclear threat. As someone who's a CIA officer, I like the idea that inspectors would be going inside their nuclear facilities. As someone who worked on Iraq for many, many years, we had no idea what Saddam Hussein was doing with his nuclear program for years and got it wrong multiple times. So I did support the deal the first time around, even though it was not perfect.
I've got one more question, and then I think your staff will grab some questions that people might be writing in the audience. So if you have questions, please pass them to the side, and we will hopefully grab some questions from you.
Alexa.
And we'll see if there are any up coming into the no questions.
I know, it's just a quiet group.
Wow, that's amazing. I can always ask more.
Please.
My last question for a while. There has been much controversy in Congress, especially in the last couple of weeks, regarding funding for Israel's Iron Dome defense system, especially from Democratic progressives, from your own party, but also from some Republican conservatives. I mean, Rand Paul
he's currently holding up the funding.
You supported Iron Dome funding. How do you explain that to the progressive branch of your own party?
Sure.
And how do you see the U.S. relationship with, a bigger question, how do you see the U.S. relationship with Israel going forward?
Well, first on Iron Dome, for folks who don't know, it's a defensive system. It's basically, it's actually kind of a cool system that identifies projectiles through telemetry when rockets or mortars are being fired, and sends out a bunch of seeking rockets and destroys the incoming projectile. There's videos on YouTube that terrify me because people should be in bomb shelters and they're out filming this kind of fireworks show that happens in the skies above Israel when there are incoming rockets. It's a system that the United States and Israel co-developed. Our scientists worked together on that. And we have a co-production agreement with the Israelis on Iron Dome. It is a purely defensive system. It cannot shoot at anyone. And when this came up a couple weeks ago now in the US Congress, we were voting on funding for the Iron Dome. Much of this funding was agreed to in this 10-year memorandum of understanding that President Obama had signed. But it came up, and a small number of people reacted negatively and did not want to vote for it. And I think my feeling is on a lot of this conversation is we have to separate, first of all, a defensive system or programs that are meant to protect people who live in Israel versus legitimate concern with the practices of the government of Israel. And I think about it like the United States under President Trump, right? A lot of people around the world did not love President Trump, but most of them did not wish ill will on the American people, despite not liking the president. And that's how I think about it with Israel, is you could disagree all day long with the Israeli government and hopefully not wish ill will on the Israeli people. Similarly, I hope we don't wish ill will on the Palestinian people. So when that came up, I think it was a desire to put down a marker to say we don't support kind of anything that is more going to the state of Israel. And because it was a defensive system, it just felt to me really unnecessary. If we want to have a conversation about how much aid goes to other countries, including Israel, we should have a conversation about it. But to kind of, because this thing happens to come up for a vote the last minute, threaten it without knowing the actual nature of the system, I just feel like it's an ill-informed conversation. Let's have a real conversation. In the end, I think 6 members of Congress on the Democratic side, did not vote for it. There were more there were additional on the Republican side, and now Republican Rand Paul in the Senate is holding it up. So I don't think it's just any one party, but I believe in having informed discussion, not knee-jerk discussion. And that's what that felt like to me, that debate a couple of weeks ago.
I mean, as someone who has studied a little bit of history, I'm a literature professor, so I only study a little bit.
Medieval.
Medieval.
So you have to,
That's right.
have to know a little bit of history.
The expression "America first" is kind of chilling.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about things like foreign aid, I mean, I can understand the desire to say, well, we have, lots of people here who need help. Maybe we should look to ourselves first. But you seem to be an internationalist. Do you have, I mean, given that we do have poverty here, we do have, I mean, God knows we have enough of our own problems.
We do.
Should we be looking internationally, or should we be looking at home?
Yeah. I think that, again, this idea that somehow if we pulled back from the world, that if we weren't engaged diplomatically, if we weren't providing targeted foreign aid, if we weren't providing leadership, as we do in many, many international organizations, that somehow we could just hole up here by ourselves, stay safe, be an economic powerhouse, and have a better life for the American people. I don't believe that's a true option. And there, again, look to history. There's been times where we've tried to be real isolationists, where we've tried. I mean, look at before World War II. I mean, we tried, our American presidents desperately wanted us to stay out of World War II. Does anyone regret getting involved in World War II as an American citizen? So I think that we have to be judicious about it and be honest that you can't isolate yourself from the rest, especially now, given globalization. I also, maybe it's because I been in national security for so long, I think that there are lots of problems with the way that the United States has engaged abroad, but I'd still put American leadership over Chinese leadership or Russian leadership any day of the week. And we see that now in places where we are not actively engaged, for instance, Africa, right? And the deals that have been struck with African governments with the Chinese, who are taking the resources that are available, especially in mining, and trading them, and supporting regimes that have some of the worst human rights records in the world and enabling them. I am a believer in a robust American role in the world, but hopefully one of the things that makes us good as Americans is that we admit when we have problems and mistakes, we try to learn from them, and we try to be better. Not that we're always better, but we try to be better. That's in my mind, our mandate. It is not to retract from the world and pull back from the world. It's to have an appropriate presence in the world. And I do believe that comes with leadership, because without us, it gets worse from there.
Do you think we should open our borders more than we have?
I think we need an immigration policy. So you're getting some questions.
Ah, we have questions now.
I think we need an immigration policy. We need an actual real immigration policy. And we don't have one. And when you don't have one, you have horrible scenes like we have at the border. We have people here in Michigan, from hotels to robotics firms to everyone in between, to all the hotels up in Mackinac Island that can't open because they can't get enough labor. They all want access to legal immigrant labor, legal, but they can't get it. We have kids who were brought here when they were little, 2 and 3 years old, from other countries, DACA kids, who don't have a path to citizenship, who are in like a holding pattern, who deserve to be American citizens. And we have people coming in, particularly at the southern border, that overwhelm us in a way that isn't good for them and isn't good for us. And that's because we don't have an immigration policy. It's broken. So I believe we should key immigration to our economy. It is very clear to me that we need legal immigrant labor. And by the way, our competitive advantage over places like China and Russia is that people still want to move here. No one's crushing into China, desperately hoping to get into China. And the minute they start doing that, we're in trouble, because we have the best universities and training and opportunities, and we need to keep that edge if we want the best minds from around the world to come to this place at any level of education. We want the ambitious, the best, the most passionate to come to our country and not some other country. So we need an immigration policy, period.
So I have some questions for you from
Okay.
the audience, and some of them are written darker than others, so I'm glad of that because my eyes are not great. But here's one that's kind of light, and I may stumble over it. What are your thoughts on the political divide among American Jews, particularly the vast number of Orthodox Jewish Trump supporters who continue to support far-right candidates despite their rampant anti-Semitism?
Yeah. Well, look, Jewish people are allowed to agree and disagree like any other group of people. We're not a monolith. And I think that's the joke, right? That Jewish people like 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I think that while Jews have typically been Democratic in this country, the vast majority of Jews tend to vote Democratic. I do think that there is, I think, a growing number of Jewish Americans who are affiliating with the Republican Party and more conservative groups, particularly over the Israel issue. And the thing that's the hardest for me to accept is, look, there's lots of opinions about what the US-Israel relationship should be, but I would never trade a certain view on that for the safety and security of my own kids in this country. And there's no way to say it any other way. The rise of anti-Semitism has made Jewish people, maybe not dramatically, but in some way less safe. This is the greatest level of anti-Semitism of my lifetime.
Mine too.
Of yours too.
Mine too.
We've
And I'm
had
old.
murderous, mass murder attacks in our synagogues. And it's because of conspiracies that have been promoted through far right channels. I mean, there's a right Tree of Life Synagogue, like the guy came in there because he believed a conspiracy theory put out on the internet that Jews were purposely bringing immigrants over the southern border in order to make this nation no longer a white nation. He wrote a whole paper about it. So I think, again, have whatever view you want on the US-Israel relationship, but please don't sacrifice the security and safety of Jewish Americans by affiliating with groups who on any given day like I saw on January 6th, would happily go back to old anti-Semitic tropes in a heartbeat, who would happily separate Jews from non-Jews and use discrimination in a violent scenario. I can't accept affiliating with the far right, the anti-Semitic far right, because you happen to have a certain view about U.S.-Israel relations.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm haunted by the Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt. It won't disappear for me.
Yeah, and I walked through that crowd that morning, and I was in the Capitol on January 6th, and I think that it was kind of like the Lollapalooza of right-wing groups. You know, there was like right across from a big anti-Semitic crowd was like, you know, a church choir singing, and everybody in, you know, it was like really a very wide range of people who were there. And I think the bottom line is we have to be vigilant about anti-Semitism wherever we see it. And that includes in our own political affiliations, that includes in our own groups, in our own people that we associate with. And we can't turn a blind eye to that kind of thing because it happens to be in a political party that in general we like. The crowd is super silent, super creepy.
Well,
guys.
yes,
Super creepy.
we have. Oh, but you want me to choose? Oh my God, I thought you were choosing.
Go with the ones you can read.
Yes, that's what I'm doing. Oh, this one's interesting. I recall you explaining your first impeachment vote at a heated constituent meeting. Would love to hear about that all. Your process of deciding your vote, justifying it to angry constituents in your swing district.
Sure. Yeah.
That had to be fun.
Yeah. So that was 2019. I was, you know, I was elected in 2018, started in January of 2019. And pretty quickly into 2019, there were voices from within the Congress and all over the country that were calling for the impeachment of the president. I represent a district that voted for President Trump, both in 2016 and again in 2020. But back in 2019, I knew that as a brand new legislator, voting for impeachment was a bad political move for me, right? For someone who represents a Trump voting district. So frankly, I was resistant. You know, there were a bunch of people throwing out different ideas or different reasons why they thought he should be impeached. In the September of 2019 was in the course of sort of a couple of weeks or maybe even a week, we started to get information that the president of the United States had reached out to a foreign government, the Ukrainians, and asked for help, for dirt in an American election, right? And I'm on this text chain with all the other freshmen of the time who were either veterans of the military or the intelligence community. And we're all texting each other. All of us had not come out for impeachment. And we started texting each other and saying, are you reading this? Are you seeing this? Does anyone else feel like this is different? Does anyone else feel like this is just beyond the pale for an American president to ask for foreign help in an American election? And we did. And over the course of a weekend, we got a Google Doc together and we wrote a joint op-ed saying it's now time to have an impeachment inquiry. And that kicked off 3 of the hardest months of my professional life. The inquiry was had, and I had to make a decision based on the presentation over 3 months of what I was going to do. We decided we were going to be as open and transparent as possible. We had 6 town halls in 3 months, most of which were in areas that were quite conservative and really voted in strong numbers for President Trump. And they were sporty. They were sporty town halls. I think that I think looking back, when I finally made my decision, quite frankly, I was going back and reading all the documents. I went back and read a lot of the original framing documents, like by the framers of the United States, our original founding fathers. I had a copy of the Constitution. I was reading the Book of House Practice and Rules. I mean, I was trying to really immerse myself in facts and data to help make my decision. And just by chance, I'm part of this bipartisan group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And we had a holiday party that was at the National Archives. And if you have ever been to the National Archives, it is literally the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it is the original, you know, in this amazing rotunda. And it is like, it is as close to a national spiritual space as we have in this country. And I kind of wandered away from the party, and there was the Constitution sitting in front of me. And I made my decision. It was the best thing that ever, I think, could happen to a legislator in their first term. I had to basically accept that I wouldn't be reelected in making that decision. I was asked every single day on camera for 3 months, like, are you going to be a one-term member? Are your constituents going to fire you next year? Every single day I got asked that question. So you get really comfortable saying, like, I might not be coming back. I might not be reelected, but there has to be something that's more important than just getting reelected. And I would like to be reelected, but I'm not going to die if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity just to keep the job. And I made that decision, and all I can say is I wish it upon every first-term legislator to have to cast a vote that could end your career in your first year, because it allows you to vote your conscience. And I think that is important, and that in Michigan, having some decency and integrity still matters, or else I don't think I would have come back for my second term.
I had promised I wouldn't get into this kind of politics, but I've got to ask. How do you explain people? I mean, we know that there are members of Congress who are pretty confident that Joe Biden won the election, and are publicly.
Joe Biden won the election.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not going to give airtime.
Well, okay, but I guess my question is that gap in integrity, to be willing to acknowledge that publicly. How do we explain that? I mean, you know, how does a public servant get to that space? Is winning that important?
Yes, if you have, I think there are people that I serve with in Congress who truly believe that President Trump won the election. They are true believers.
Okay.
And then there are a much larger group of people who know that he didn't win, but they want to win their next election, and they don't want to contradict the most vocal part of their base.
Wow.
I know it, because they'll tell me privately, yeah, Elissa, I know, but you should see my district, you know, or you should hear what they're saying. And I had a Republican legislator say to me, I said, you know, I'll call him Joe. I said, Joe, you know that this election has been reviewed and looked at, you know, 400 separate court cases across the country. Like, this is, you know, that this is a legitimate election. And he said, Elissa, I know, but you should see what's happening in my district. I'm being threatened. My family's being threatened.
Wow.
My office is being threatened. Militias are forming in my state. It's dangerous out there. And I said, Joe, you know what we call that in my district? Wednesday. And like, buck up. And if you are going to change your vote based on fear, this isn't the right job for you. So I think that the way I explain it is that people like the perceived privilege of being a member of Congress, and they don't want to give that up. And that is unfortunately a sad statement.
I'm going to ask you one last
Yes,
question, which
and
I'm
I see my
certain
staff
comes
like
from a
looming in
student.
the background.
Yeah, I know. But this is a student question, and I think it's kind
Yes.
of, especially after your last answer. Do you have advice for someone wanting to go into politics, either the House or the Senate someday?
Yes. Do it. Because the country doesn't get better if good people decide not to run, and good people on both sides of the aisle. I want two strong, healthy parties, maybe more, but two strong, healthy parties with integrity and empathy who have different views on how the role of government should be in our lives and how we should look at our economy. Those are legitimate ideas that we can disagree on. I want two healthy parties. And the only way that you get there is by when good people decide to run for office, when good people decide to sit it out. This is what I'm terrified of on like school boards. You know, if you're a decent person right now and you're looking at the abuse that school boards are taking, whatever side of the issues you are, you say, I'm not joining the school board. That's a problem. We need stronger school boards. So my advice is do it. And my advice is the way that you learn to lead is by stepping up for leadership roles in student clubs, running for office, in, you know, in your office, in literally your workspace, like whatever opportunity you have to exert leadership. There's no way to learn to lead. I'm married to a military officer. There's nothing better than trial by leading. And you can't just prepare for 20 years by studying, with no offense to any of the poli-sci professors who are out there. I'm sorry, you can't study for leadership. You have to lead and understand how to lead with decency and make mistakes and then learn from them. And then that is the right person to run for office.
I cannot thank you enough. That you are magnificent.
Oh, Jesus.
You are really.
Thank you.
I've got some swag for you.
Oh, good.
I've got some EMU swag for you,
geez.
some Jewish studies swag and some EMU swag.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Really wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for
Thank you. Thank you.